Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, one of those posts covering finance and property news. It's Monday evening again, and of course, Edwin is back for another rant. And we were just saying it's getting more and more and more silly, isn't it, Edwin?
Oh, look, I was expecting to see you on the podcast with bridled with a muzzle and just with talking sign language, because otherwise, Martin, you're gonna end up in one of those European prisons.
Well, it is concerning because, of course, following the outbreaks of violence over the last week or two, the courts have clamped down very heavily on offenders, including those who did no more than tweet or share information on social media and other platforms relating to these and expressing opinions about what was going on. So it is concerning that the people who are defining what truth is, the government and the law, are effectively now silencing points of view and not allowing free speech to be so free. So, yeah, interesting times. I'm still going to talk it the way I think it and see it, but it is fascinating that several hundred people are now in prison, and some of those for just going on social media.
Well, look, what Dusty tells me is that they're going to bring some of those laws here, and we're not going to be able to talk about the clearance rates, the auction clearance rates with regards to the properties that are not counted in. So Louis Christopher and others will end up behind the clinker as well in the clink.
It's all about what is truth, all right? Who defines what truth is? And we seem to have moved now away from having robust discussions and debates about all of those things to somebody deciding what truth is and then saying, well, if you want to say anything other than truth, then that clearly isn't allowed. And of course, the online bill already talked about in Australia and some of the other stuff there is essentially making it more and more difficult to put alternative views and opinions up. Now, I've always had the view that it's good to have different views and different opinions and different voices so that people can make up their own minds. But the question is, who defines what truth is? And if you actually happen to have a different set of views to those that actually are mainstream, then what do you do? And of course, it's interesting that over time, what was at one point seen as conspiracy theory, a bit later down the tracks, can suddenly seem like truth. So, you've got to be really careful about who's setting the rules here.
Yeah, and it's also who's whinging. Right, who's whinging? So if I continue to put shit on the REA New South Wales and REA Victoria, and they start whinging, I could get locked up, and I'm going to be locked up for no other reason than talking as to what is discussed and what is taught in the corridors of the REI New South Wales and REI Victoria and all the REIs. And obviously it's going to be do as I say, not do as I do, because historically we even had the president of the REIA, the Real Estate Institute of Australia, and being the president also of the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales, fiddling with trust accounts that others would otherwise lose their licenses. But if they complain that I'm talking about it and bring to light the fact that the presidents have fiddled and diddled with trust accounts, and their excuse after investigation and by Fair Trade in New South Wales is, but we put it back. We put it back. So I guess we're all in trouble, Martin. We're all in trouble when we start voicing, as you said, the opinion that's contrary, that should bring about healthy discussions and debate about what some say, or those that deem to be the rulers over us as saying, in doing or not doing, and what's really happening on the ground. So in essence, anybody that talks contrary to the mainstream, anybody that talks contrary to the flavour of the month, and anybody that says anything that's gonna upset somebody of some gender identity, or that's, or let's not talk about dancing in the Olympics, or let's not talk about boxing in the Olympics. Anybody that talks contrary to those issues, you're going to be in a lot of hot water. So we better say what we need to say now. But then again, Martin, we better not say too much, because didn't one of your politicians also get this barred or from the political scene, because there was a post that she posted 8 or 10 years ago, something like that?
Yes.
Was I reading right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, people looked back, and it is pretty shocking, actually, what's going on. And talking about what happens in response, I was minded to think about David Chandler, of course, the New South Wales Building Commissioner, who's about to step down. There was an interesting article here, and one of the things that he said was, when he started to get into the job and started looking around and seeing just how bad the building the building was, and started making a fuss, he got trolled by the industry, abusive platform to get, quote, shit off their liver. And the point there is that, people get upset, and even those people who have some position of power can actually be reaping the whirlwind when they actually start poking the bear, as it were, and saying, hang on a moment, the quality of the build isn't what it should be. And he's had huge amounts of flack over the years. He's been trying to pull this back in line, and we've still got builders and building processes that are absolutely wrecked. And so I think there's a really interesting story here about those who stand up for truth and what happens to them. And it's not an easy path, nevertheless. But, that shouldn't stop us. We've still got to, I think, call things out. And I suppose the other question you've got to always ask, Edwin, is who are the experts anyway, as you put in this particular tweet, right? Who are the experts? What are they drinking? What are they smoking? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. What are they smoking? Because I want some of that shit. Because wherever they live, or wherever they park themselves, or wherever they're typing these articles on, they're smoking some pretty potent stuff, and pass it around. Pass it around is my call. It's interesting. I read the article, and obviously, it's a lifestyle, about a lifestyle of the people that work. Their livelihood is the circus. They're going around. I mean, that's and I'm not talking about being politician. I'm not talking about the political circus. I'm talking about real circus, obviously. Which we've been talking about and discussing how this whole approach to the housing crisis, whether it be rental or wanting to own a roof over your head, the crisis that we're facing, it's an absolute circus, the way that the left and the right want to tackle it, or not tackle it for that matter, or just introduce or create committees to deal with these issues, and that's where most of the money is spent. So we talk about a lot of stuff, but we don't do anything. And I guess it's all about the fanfare. It's all about the look at us in how we can do trampolining, how we can do make the bears jump through hoops, and the lions stand up and roar and everything else. But in the meantime, the bloody circus tent is on fire, and we're about to be engulfed in flames as a nation. But you know what? They not only want us to participate in the circus that they've created, but now they want us to live like circus people, which there's nothing wrong with the way they live, but that's their lifestyle. That's the lifestyle of how many thousands of people would be involved and would have this sort of lifestyle, now that they want to translate the lifestyle of 10,000, 20,000 circus members. Let's call it 100,000. circus groups or families, 100,000 in total, that make up the circus family that live their nomadic lifestyle because they're accustomed to it. They're, in most part, they're a generational lifestyle that they've been accustomed to, and now they want us to live like that. So it's not about fixing the issue that the other 25.900,000 million people may be facing, or a percentage of that, a high percentage of that may be facing. It's about living like the 100,000 group. Let's live like them. That's the solution. It's not about the increase of population by way of the immigration policy under this government. And let me say it again. I believe that there would have been similar, maybe not as much, but similar numbers come in under the Libs. So I'm not holding back on that. So let's resolve and let's look at the human rights and house the individuals, but not our Aussies, not the Aussies, but let's house the 3.5 or 3.7 billion other people in the rest of the world. Let the 26 million people that live here in Australia house them. I mean, I'm not, as I said in the last podcast, Martin, I'm pro immigration. I come from, our family immigrated here. We came in the 70s. My father was in a sought after industry, a blue collar worker, came over, and the government paid for us all to come here because of the need. I'm all for housing refugees, from all parts of the world that are facing diabolical, circumstances. But I'm not for bringing in students to house, to facilitate the coffers of the chancellor and the vice chancellors of the universities and the tickle and giggle tertiary education centres. I'm not for bringing other people in just so as we can try to keep the costs down. Which, by the way, somebody needs to tell these politicians that the labour cost, particularly in the building industry, is not going down. Maybe the labourers, maybe some are paying less, but the contract values of a job isn't going down in price. So it's really having the opposite effect, and obviously, so this is what's next, Martin. All I can say is what's next. What we're gonna. So it's a whole circus. They're gonna, they want us to live in modular homes or mobile homes. Which, by the way, a decent mobile home, particularly the one that they showed in this article, I would buy 10 of those prime movers with a decked out trailer at the back as a home. I would buy 10 of those if you could get them at 350,000, because I'll flog them off for 500,000. I know how much rigs are worth. I know. I've got a lot of friends in the trucking industry, and I know how much these things are worth, let alone something that's been converted into a trailer. I mean, and if you go to the Winnebagos, if you go to the buses, if you go to the smaller units, you're still paying upwards of 200,000 for something half decent. So it's even that the solution that they're promoting is not a cheap one. So I mean, look, and the next thing is really just going to be, let's put everybody in a cage like the circus animals. That's the other option, right? I don't know, I just can't see any other way. Stack up a whole bunch of 20-foot containers. So you've got 8-foot containers, 20-foot containers, 40-foot containers. So if you're a single individual, you get to live in an 8-foot container. If you're a young couple, no kids, you get to live in a 20-foot container, or maybe one child. And if you're a family of 5, 4 or more, you get given a 40-foot container, and we stack them up. How high do we go? I mean, that's the next logical, based on the logics that we currently got. that's the next step, I would say, for the government. But hey, let's not talk out loud, because whatever we say in the show seems to translate one way or another in real life, Martin.
Well, yeah, that's a big concern, but the whole idea of encouraging more people to move into mobile homes and live that way, as you say, a very particular lifestyle. But there's a broader circus here, which I just want to focus on too, because I don't know whether you saw this, but we've now got Claire O'Neill as the new housing minister, and she came out with a really startling, deep, penetrating analysis of the problem in the housing. We've got a housing supply problem, we've got a housing affordability problem, and we've got a housing construction problem. But as Scott Phillips said, the new housing minister has identified the right problems, except that her solutions, there's one huge, massive, glaring omission. There's no mention of the demand side, so precisely migration and those things. It ignores Economics 101, that prices are set where supply and demand intersect. So unless you're thinking about migration and demand, then you're never going to solve it. And it's quite interesting because Michael Sukker, of course, was in the government before they lost power. So he's now on the other side of the house. But he's basically written an article here. The housing minister, Claire O'Neill, vowed to find a new way to boost the supply of housing and curb the soaring cost of construction. But he says, so Albanese changed housing ministers so that we could get some trite thoughts on well-known issues in housing with absolutely no solutions, although the minister couldn't bring herself to mention the more than 1 million migrants who have arrived in just the past 2 years. And I think that really quite sums up the housing circus that we've got, right? Nobody really wants to talk about the critical issues that we've got. And just one other little factor, you mentioned the costs are going up. Well, of course, there's an interesting article here that says that the CFMEU pay deal is likely to lift costs of new construction, for example, in Brisbane by 4 to 6% in 2024. So there you go, a bit of government policy directly leading to further property price inflation, which of course is not particularly surprising given everything that we've seen. And given that point, I thought it was quite interesting that Mirvac, one of the big construction companies, reported their results last week, and they actually identified the unrelenting rise in labour and materials costs, and that's halved its profit margins on some big apartment projects and will lead to significantly lower earnings this year. And there's a vicious cycle of rising construction costs, a higher cost of debt and building materials, coupled with a record surge in subcontractor insolvencies, all ate away at margins, which means, of course, there's less construction activity, there's less new buildings being built and approved for construction. And I did make a show actually the other day highlighting the fact that, of course, the other part of the government solution is this build to rent solution, which has been used in some other countries, but only just starting off in Australia. But now the construction costs make build to rent quite unlikely in Australia. And by the way, it's not a very good solution. So once again, what we see is the circus is in town, right? Nobody really wants to have a serious conversation about solving some of these things, supply and demand. Well, how do you deal with demand? Well, it's pretty obvious, but nobody wants to talk about that. And that's, of course, because they want to pump and pump and pump. And then the final point, just to circle back, on the education story, there's been some really interesting reports this last week. Of course, the education sector claims that they're one of the major exports in the country, but it's actually fudge figures, because actually most of the people who come into the education sector come from overseas and then sort of do stuff in Australia. So actually it's not really an export in the first place. So this whole story is completely misconstrued by, of course, the education sector, who actually want to preach the gospel of we need to build our universities and we need more people to throw degrees at. So the circus, it's all here. Who needs another one?
Look, in the circus, there's the grand finale, right? I know what you liked the most, whether it was the lions or whether it was the trapeze act. I know which one was it's one of the two, but we've got both. We've got the lion act, which I'll talk about, and then we've got the Trapeze Act, which is education. But the Line Act, we'll start on that first, right? So we got the two biggest things that happened. That the most exciting for me, anyway, when I went to the circus, and I had one of our family friends was a Colombian trouble with the Moscow Circus, in the 70s and in the early 80s, and she was the line tamer there, and so we got to see the lions and the cubs, pet them and play games with them. So that's how close I got to the circus, but in that sense, right? So the lions were always an attraction for me. So in our circus of our political world that we're in right now, the Line Act is what Philip Seuss puts up there, and he said, in that I didn't read the article, just didn't have time to read the article, and it says New South Wales, the Labor Treasurer, New South Wales Treasurer takes time out from housing crisis to buy a $4 million house. So what do you think of them apples, Martin? I mean, that to me, that is the second best thing to the circus that we're in. And I'll get to the education part that you spoke about after your thoughts on taking time aside to buy a $4 million house whilst we've got a housing crisis.
Well, I'm afraid it doesn't surprise me. So we know that politicians are particularly active in the property sector. They are overrepresented in terms of investment properties. And of course, they're very well paid relative to other people. And of course, they've had quite a few nice pay rises in recent times, unlike many other people. So they can afford it. It's all about don't do what I do, do as I say, right? And that's really part of the problem here. And I come back to a fundamental disconnect between ordinary people and what the politicians are actually on about. And in fact, the story is often not well told. Whether you saw this, but I actually put up a post at the weekend just mapping some of the household financial pressure. And it's quite interesting how it's represented in certain areas, but not in other areas. And what's quite interesting is that you won't find that many politicians buying in areas with high financial pressure. Of course, they all want to buy in exclusive suburbs where, of course, the economics are very different, and the story around what's going on in property is quite different. And that's one of the reasons why you still see articles like this, which talks about the record prices set, etc., etc. So if you read this all as a source of truth, you'd think that everything was when the garden was lovely. Maybe they're writing this specifically for those politicians so that they can get to a self-reinforcing reference cycle, right? So got to buy because prices are still going up. The truth is, of course, it's a completely different story for many people. And I think this is quite interesting because, some people are now struggling as to know what to do. And there was an article here that said, well, maybe you should go overseas. So Queenslanders are opting to retire overseas because it's a bigger bang for the buck than actually staying in Australia. People are moving to cheaper cost of living, higher probability of care by friends or family, inadequate health and medical infrastructure as people age, which is remarkable. So, the story is let the politicians buy big properties and let's encourage those who are getting older to go somewhere else in the world, right? Because we can't look after them anymore. This is, what do you say?
Yeah. So you've got to round that off. So you've got let's send the retirees overseas so they can sell their homes here and live in Thailand, Vietnam, and other parts of close by, somewhere in Indonesia, Malaysia, wherever. You can't go to Singapore because that's very expensive, and live a cheaper lifestyle and be taken care of a lot. But they don't discuss the issues around migration into these countries also, right? They don't discuss the fact that you've got no security in these countries. Hence the reason why people from these countries want to come to Australia and park their money here. So then they're saying let's tax the retirees, with properties that are worth $2 million plus, so that they can then force them a forced sale, per se, so they can go and retire in whoop whoop, I guess, where there's no infrastructure, where there's a fear of getting old, and getting old in the regions of New South Wales or any other state for that matter, in the outer regions from the city centres, in the outer regions. It's very costly. It's very expensive to get old in a lot of towns of New South Wales, because there is no health facility. There are no healthcare workers. There are no the infrastructure is dying, as you and Robbie have been talking about as well, with the economic side of it and the banking side of it, which we've discussed. So then let's move into Winnebagos and trailers and mobile trailers. But by the way, Martin, let me say this, that one of our followers, a client of ours, a client of mine that we're assisting in the eastern suburbs to prepare his house for sale to take to market, with a local agent. I've been going around his area, and he's pointing out the Winnebagos around the eastern suburbs that are just doing the round. So people are already living like this. They're already living this nomadic life. I mean, they're the lucky ones that can afford a $250,000 mobile van to get around in and stay in the area, obviously for their personal needs. Then, of course, I still haven't seen the tents or tent cities popping up, because they're easier to move on. Whereas a Winnebago or a mobile van, caravan, bus, you can go from parking station, public parking area to the next, or a park to the next, blah, blah. You can just move around, right? It's catch me if you can, so to speak, with the councils. So that's already happening now. And as I said earlier on, the next thing is we're going to be corralled into cages or into 8-foot containers, 20-foot or 40-foot containers, and try your luck. So that's that side of things. So that's the side of the line. The line's performing, and now we've got the Trapeze Act, because for me, the pièce de résistance of a circus outlay is the trapeze. You sort of think, I think is one of these poor bastards gonna fall off and crack his head on the floor. It's pretty exciting, scary, exhilarating. So you mentioned, so I liken that to our circus of the education system, which Matt Barry put up a post with regards to what the education system says, or the government says that they're bringing into the country by way of expenditure, and I extrapolated that, and I wrote, posted that Matt Barry's tweet, posted it back up with my version, and as I shared on the Monday Evening Property Rants a few weeks ago, we shared on the fact, how do students live here in Australia? The government thinks that they're spending the money here. Well, they are really, but it's all through WeChat wallets, it's all through Alipay, it's all through all these digital transactions, but none of the money is taxed here, because the parents pay for accommodation on the WeChat, through WeChat as well, through real estate agencies that accept that WeChat pay through the WeChat wallet. Now, a lot of people say, hold on, how can that be? How can you do? Look, the thing is, you've got property investors, which a large portion of property investors are made up of Asian families, mainly Chinese families that have families over in China, or have dual citizenship, or have banking accounts, historical banking accounts back in China, so they can receive money over there, and then they give that money to their to the family. So the taxman, the taxman sees none of that. So they buy the food, they buy the groceries, they buy the essential needs, they pay their rent through this WeChat wallet. So this farcical thing that the government's saying, but they're bringing so many billions of dollars into the economy. Well, really, Do they really? So that's to me is the pièce de résistance of the circus that we're in, because you sort of got to ask yourself the question: is the government aware of this? Are they turning a blind eye to this? Do they really know? Because at the end of the day, really, obviously, the tertiary education facilities, campuses, they get paid in Aussie dollars, so they don't care. So the rest of it is BS, Martin. In real life, and this is what we said earlier on. So this is what we know happens at grassroots level. This is what we know happens on a day-to-day basis, and they try to tell the governments tell the general populace, oh yeah, but there's so much money coming in, and it's there's such great value to the economy. When in actual fact, it's a huge strain to the economy by the way that we're feeling right now. First and foremost, is through the rental crisis and the property crisis that we're facing. So it's a circus. It's nothing else but a circus. But unfortunately, those that vote for these idiots are being hoodwinked, and unfortunately, they make up the majority. But it's not so much the majority that vote Labor or Liberal. It's the majority. It's the parties that group themselves together to form a minority government. And it's time that we need to take other action. Each to their own. I don't want to get too political, but that's how it's translating. And obviously the WeChat chatters are also picking up on a lot of these things, Martin, because obviously they're the ones that are influencing the landscape of in the Sydney region as to what happens with housing, and for to a greater extent also in the Melbourne region when they called it quits on investing there in Melbourne and the issues that they're facing down there. So there are things that they're talking about with regards to the Australia being the flavour of the month once again. Since 2023, Australia is now the number one destination of worldwide high net worth individual inflow, surpassing UAE, Dubai, and Singapore. I mean, China remains to be the biggest source of buyers, foreign buyers, but that doesn't include, and this is what a lot of people need to understand, that doesn't include Hong Kong, which is calculated separately, and it doesn't include Malaysia and Thailand, and they're still ranking pretty high. Singaporeans in that Dusty says in that article that there's a big portion of that article dedicated to Singaporean. The momentum is growing. In other words, Singaporean because of the huge growth that they've had in their property market, and it's they're investing in our market, and they're looking here. And you've also got a lot of expats coming back, dual citizenship individuals coming back to Australia as well, and buying here. So the momentum is growing from Singapore, which is potentially going to surpass the appetite that the mainland Chinese sprees had over the years. So, but let's not also forget about the new kids on the block, the Vietnamese, Martin. So that is putting more pressure on our local buyers, and of course they also talk a great deal about about what's happening with the CFMEU and the cost of living. So they're saying, look, with all these costs that are going up, with all in terms of construction, 26% increase, pay rises to CFMEU associated workers, and obviously everybody else is going to demand a pay rise as well, not as much as the CFMEU. You're going to have your 10%, 12%, 6%, whatever, and then the cost of materials, which High Rise Harry is complaining about. They're saying keep on buying homes, keep on expanding your portfolio, because freestanding homes are going to become more expensive.
Absolutely. Well, once again, they're ahead of the curve with a lot of this stuff. I think it's quite interesting how we sometimes highlight some of these issues, and then a few weeks later it gets picked up in the more mainstream media. So a finger on the pulse as always. I just want to move the conversation on slightly to another angle on this circus. And this circus specifically relates to the RBA. You know, we discussed last week, are they likely to raise rates or not? And of course, Michelle Bullock didn't raise rates, but it was interesting that she basically said that, well, there's still a chance that rates may have to go higher. Call the question because inflation's hotter and it's going on for a lot longer. And it's interesting that she also said that house prices on average were climbing faster in the regions than in metropolitan Australia. That's as a result of population growth and the housing supply not yet responded. We know that the strain on household finances from high housing costs is being felt acutely in our regional areas, as well as our cities, and could continue for some time if construction activity remains low. Now, that I think she set up in Armidale, which is perhaps no surprise then. And of course, Christopher Joy basically put out his latest article, which basically said that the Reserve Bank's credibility is shot, and she's kicked the target out. So effectively, we're not looking to be in the 2 to 3% band until quite a lot later. And well, at what point will it come back into band? Will it come back into band with the current rates? Now, that's quite interesting because the other side of the circus is that the economists are still tipping rate cuts next year. So, you know, if the unemployment rate rises, you could perhaps expect to see significant impact and therefore cut rates. But the fallout is quite interesting. So there was this article that basically questioned whether rent investing made any sense now because the costs are just remarkably squeezed, particularly if you don't get as much capital appreciation as you might have been thinking about. And because of the high cost of living, more people are now tapping super to try and get by, according to AMP. So all of those things are suggesting that things are not as well as perhaps you might expect. And, you know, it is worth just understanding that the circus where you've got the RBA now saying, well, what the government's been doing is actually stoking inflation rather than helping to squeeze inflation. Whereas Chalmers is saying, no, we're helping to reduce inflation. Well, the temporary supports temporarily duck inflation, but then it comes back up again. So it's not really helping. So it's a mess. And once again, the old circus adage comes in. I think they're more clowns, though, those, rather than the High Wire Act.
But see, the thing is, Dusty wants to get into the action, Martin. Dusty's that look. We've got a new segment now. From time to time, we're going to bring up Dusty's predictions, right? Because Dusty's being on the money, and Dusty says that according to what's going on, and the fact that we didn't have a rate rise, and last week, she's saying that 2024 no rate rises at all. Then she's calling a rate cut. Well, there'll be one rate cut in 2024. And then look, she's got her reasons. Dusty does have her reasons. She's getting into the action. The Aussie dollar's going south, which is like that. But she strongly believes that the RBA is politicized. It's no longer independent. It hasn't been for a while. And the Greens have got the thumb on the scale. So you've got a lot to navigate through, a lot of landmines to navigate through. And okay, yes, inflation's going up, but the thing is, construction costs go up along with it. And what do the government need? What do we want? We want housing. When do we want it? We want it now. and if construction costs keep on climbing, and our cost of material keep on going, another rate rise, it's really going to put the those few thousand homes that the government's building across Australia, put them in jeopardy, and the costs are going to continue to escalate. Nothing's going to get done, which I know that nothing's being done anyway. So that's what Dusty told me to share tonight under her predictions, and it's just a wait and see. Because and as we spoke last week, what would happen if rates went up? What were the what's happening on the ground? What's the word on the ground? What's the market sentiment on the ground? This is and people are tired of waiting. People are now that there's a rate. Basically there wasn't any movement. Those that have been waiting on the sideline in some parts of Sydney, there's more activity in others. Has been it's been the same because of price points. But let's share that commentary, Martin, and let's go one by one with regards to now. These are big offices that have had anywhere from let's say from 8 to 25 open houses per office in the different regions. So in the Northwest region, this office had 21 opens over the weekend, and this is my conversation with one of the main parties there, asking them what has the sentiment changed? Were there more people on the weekend? What did they get more offers this weekend than previous 2 weekends? And his response was a bit better yesterday with numbers, which is good. Not crazy numbers, but better than the last 2 weeks, which is what we wanted, which is obviously what the office wanted, because I guess in that region, because prices have climbed so much over the last 6 months, if there was a rate rise, then obviously there was going to be a lot less activity, and people were going to be a lot more cautious and wait until we're well and truly into the spring season to have more greater choice in order to see what they could buy. So that's in the Northwest region with 21 an office that has 21 opens. In the eastern suburbs, again, similar questions. I asked one of the managers there of the office. He had 25 groups at one of the properties there in the Maroubra area. The rest were normal, he says, mainly because in normal, it's still 10 to 12 groups. We're talking the eastern suburbs. Entry point in these areas in your Maroubra is $3.5 million to $4 million for something that needs a lot of work. Pretty much a full renovation. That's all. We're talking freestanding homes, but obviously, he's talking about apartments as well. There was less there because there's less appetite for apartments. Everybody's got a huge appetite for freestanding homes. Bankstown region and the Lithium Auburn areas. The real estate office there, one of the licensees in charge there, he felt that inquiry was still low. It's not translating. There's still not a lot of demand. I guess again because of the price point, the demographics, the nature of the area. He himself does auctions. He had 3 auctions. At one auction, nobody turned up, and there was no registrations. The other 2 auctions were a struggle getting bids, and the 2 homes actually sold below reserve, he says. So and that's in the Blacktown LGA. There's an office that had 8 or 9. I can't remember. I think it was 8 opens. Again, similar. I asked him similar questions, and he saw a rise in the momentum. Yes, it was a good weekend with potential buyers, more Asian interest. Now that again is what the WeChat chatterers have been saying. We know in the groups that Dusty and Evan monitor, they've got a big appetite for freestanding homes. That's hence the reason why your Kings Park, Kings Langley, your Layla Parks, Doonsides, all these areas of in the lower part of Quakers Hill, they went from $1 million at the beginning of the year. Now you'd be lucky if you could get something there, something that's small, 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, for less than one, in your Kings Park areas for less than 1.3, 1.35. It's the crazy numbers, and all because you can convert them into multiple dwellings. So that's the market sentiment. And that's what's how this stay that the RBA called on last week. What's created. So the unfortunate thing, Martin, is from my point of view, from what I see overall, and obviously monitoring the WeChat chatterers, the new kids on the block, the silent tigers, and now with the issues that we've got in the Middle East, with the issues that we've got in your neck of the woods, I feel strongly that there's going to be expats are going to be coming back in greater mass. Obviously, they're not going to be moving to your western suburbs. They're not going to be going to your southwest regions or your western regions and out there. They're going to come back with a lot of money, or they're coming back with a lot of money, and they're going to be parking it in your eastern suburbs, in your shires, North Shores, and these. So these areas are going to get freestanding homes are going to get hotter, at certain price points, and that's what I feel is going to be sustaining a lot of these markets. Of course, there's going to be a lot of other people that are going to be coming in and absorbing the listings that are coming up in their southwest regions, northwest regions, and the like. But there's still a lot of appetite, local appetite for the very few homes. When I say few, the very little numbers on market that we have with respect to the demand.
Yeah, it is interesting, and as you say, the tenor of the property market is, I think, evolving. Interestingly, last month, the number of new mortgages for investors was significantly higher than it's been. In fact, significant growth over last year relative to owner occupiers, and also number of first-time buyers, down quite a lot from where it was. But the investor story is quite interesting, and it's noting this, that Finder has launched a new property investment index. So they, of course, got a lot of coverage in the press over recent days. News.com, writing about Melbourne, was saying that there are opportunities, but be careful. Poor decisions could lead to long-lasting financial woes. Prices could go either way, so it's important to invest in areas that had a high price resilience. And he also noted, this is the Finder commentator, noted that property investors should be most cautious in the current environment and interest-only mortgages. Fascinating that many investors had lost money in modern high-rise buildings or new builds with no scarcity to them, or with building issues. And I think that's a very important point. But then, of course, you've got a slightly different spin looking at the story in and around Brisbane. Investors are back in the game. Higher returns and lack of rentals makes property attractive again. Well, maybe not. But of course, they had to go to home also in South Australia, where suburbs where your money is safe as houses. And once again, talking about Finders. Now, I just want to refer back to my Mapping Household Financial Pressure show over the weekend, where I showed the true net investment yields that actually were attainable at the moment down at the postcode level across the major urban centres. And interestingly, if you look at that, what you'll see is that Melbourne, you wouldn't want probably to invest in many areas in Melbourne because of the very low returns. Whereas, in fact, both in Queensland, particularly in around Brisbane, and also in South Australia, there were actually more suburbs where investors were still getting positive net investment returns. So that's the comparison between the rent they can command versus the cost of managing the property and paying for the mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, everybody fixates on the gross investment yield, which is just a Mickey Mouse number where you compare the price of the property with the theoretical rental return without doing any further work. And the interesting observation that Finder made the point where there was that, of course, most investors are banking on prospective capital gains later. Interestingly, of course, those capital gains then are potentially taxable to an extent later if you decide to sell. So it's a very theoretical view. So I think net investment yield is a better way. So the take out of all this is that everyone's spruiking that the investors are back, but I do note that there are as many investment properties coming on the market from investors who are finding it impossible to make a return than there are investors buying. So it's a two-way street at the moment.
Yeah, and because Price Finder, all these other websites, all these other specialty, let me help you buy, through digitally. They're not taking into account. They're not taking into account. They're looking at the traditional models. Is what I'm trying to say. They're looking at the traditional way of obtaining a rental yield or rental income, in working on your averages and on your numbers and on your percentages of what's been charged for property managers and everything else. And as you said, and not taking into account the cost to maintain the property, or there's very little put back into the property. And this is whether, look, we don't tell people not to buy. We don't tell people to buy. We don't, we're trying to help them make the right decision, whatever they want to do. And also the good thing about what we're talking about also is the rental numbers and how to secure long tenancies or even how to get out of fixed term leases if they have to, or how to negotiate and all the hurdles, all the fiery rings that they have to jump through in this circus that we're in, Martin. So it's just one of those things, because you've got to look at the many different aspects of property and the many different markets in whatever region you're looking at. Yeah, so reading those articles, as that article that you mentioned is Melbourne. I mean, the question is who really wants to invest in Melbourne at this point? Things are going to get if and when Queensland goes follow the same pathway that they have been following. If they continue to follow the same pathway that Melbourne track that Melbourne's on, well then are we going to have a dump of investment properties there? But I think the catalyst there to have more properties on the market is not so much the early call for me, or the earlier call is going to be the point around not so much the taxes, but the point around the minimum standards that the rentals have to come under. And that's going to put a lot of pressure because of the materials that they use over in Queensland, the way they build there, the climate obviously affects the materials a lot differently than what we have here. So the materials deteriorate a lot quicker, and there's a lot other things that could go wrong there with the building. So that's going to be more issues, in my view, that's going to facilitate or help investors make that decision to put properties on the market, which would be a good relief for the local community that just want a roof over their head, so they can bring up the young families and house them, educate them, and have the lifestyle that once we considered as the great Aussie dream that's now become a nightmare.
Yes, nightmare indeed for many. And of course, the longer that the rates stay high, that nightmare is going to continue. There's another angle on this nightmare as well, which I thought was quite interesting. I don't know whether you saw this article, Edwin, but there was a comparison of REA versus Domain, the two big property portals. And essentially, the article says that REA, which is the majority-owned entity from News Corp, had significant growth. Its market capitalization was up. Its throughput was up. The audience rose 9% in July year to year. Comparing it with Domain, the other one, as it were, who's seen a 10.8% fall in their capitalization, and the gap in unique visits was down with 7% decline on Domain. And in fact, the gap is significant and widening. So there's an interesting commentary here about these portals. Of course, the click-through is significant, and they make a lot of money through that, et cetera, et cetera. But it is interesting that the two major portals in Australia are not actually necessarily operating precisely in the same way. And, one seems to be outdoing the other quite considerably. So I think that's fascinating. But I also want to make the point, Edwin, that as I look at the data on these portals, a lot of it is really not very accurate. Not least because a lot of the initial information that's put in by agents doesn't get updated later. And in some cases, the information isn't updated with the confirmed sale price that comes through. So the other thing I've noticed is that more and more properties listed as sold have no disclosure of the price that they were sold at. And I think that's quite interesting. And it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue for people trying to understand what's going on in the market. So these portals, dominating the spectrum, but not necessarily providing really good tools for people trying to make good decisions.
But that's not the point. And this is what I'm saying. Whatever they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it is, in my view, is getting us closer to my call that REA and Domain will stand as real estate houses, in which they will then contract out the services to licensed real estate agents. Now, we've discussed that in the past, and that is still my view. And as this is coming front of mind, and other stuff that I've been talking with George from the industry training college in Newcastle that we often get on the show from time to time, what he's been sharing with me of late as well. It's really we're edging closer to that now. You've got to consider that their game and the game of the selling agents, or the majority of the real estate body, is not for price disclosure. It's not for price transparency. It's not for it's not a fair game. Look, we go back to the circus that's currently the Olympics at the moment. You're going in the ring. You're going in the ring with Mike Tyson identifying as a real estate agent, and you're there as a vendor confronting Mike Tyson. So there you go. That's who you've got if you're trying to buy. And also, if you are trying to rent or get around, trying to be first cab off the rank on the rental list of the property managers, unless you've got connections, unless you've got contacts, and it's a pecking order in the rental arena for the sought after rentals. There are ways to navigate around there. There are things that you can say. There are things that you may say, and then you can withdraw, because you can't contract yourself out of legislation and out of the regulations. But there's all these things. So without knowing all that, as I said, you're jumping into a ring with Mike Tyson identifying as a real estate agent, and you're there. Facing, going toe to toe, and you're trying to, and you think you can outsmart them. As vendors, they're hoodwinking the vendors. Which we bring out from time to time, the shenanigans that go on there, because I know a lot of agents in different areas, different regions, different markets, and I know when you've got the blatant underquoting that the agents are promoting or putting up as false and misleading, through false and misleading advertising. But they don't get caught out, because they hoodwink the vendors into signing bullshit agency agreements, allowing them to do it, and the vendors don't know. I heard of a story only a week ago, and this is an agent in the mountains, in the mid-mountains. The agent is actually from the lower mountains that sold the property, was trying to sell a property in the mid-mountains, and told the owner that the property was, what was, in his view, was worth $850,000 to $900,000. And lo and behold, without the owner knowing, this case, the owner didn't know. The agent started marketing the property, and without the owner's permission, started marketing the property at $760,000 as a guide. Now, talking to the current agent that now has that listing, because they've sacked the other agent and agency, and they've got this one. And talking to this current agent that has that listing that I know well, I said to him, mate, why didn't the owner? This is a blatant underquoting. Why didn't the owner go and report this? I used other words, but let's mellow it down to this bastard to fair trading. Some people just can't be bothered. Now this is one in 10,000 case where the agent's blatantly done it without the knowledge of the vendor. But in the majority, 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time, there is a way that the agents use, and there is a method or a spiel that they've learned from the industry, from the so-called industry trainers, such as our mate that we often talk about on the show, where they get taught how to play these games, and they get away with it because of the loopholes in the pre-signed forms that they get vendors to sign, so that if there is an investigation by fair trading, they can say, "But look, I've got the signed piece of paper that says I can reduce the price, and here it is," or that they'll bring the one that correlates with the guide that they're given. I mean, I know the BS that goes on. So, but unfortunately, as I say again, so the websites, the agents, the industry is not there to help the vendor, and it's not there to help, by all means, it's not there to help the buyer, because they are there first and foremost to assist the agent, because it's the agent that brings in the marketing revenue that pays, pumps the money pumps the $2.6 billion of marketing revenue to REA and Domain on a yearly basis. So why would they want to sort of help the let's say the consumer or the buyer, the consumer being the vendor or the buyer, right? Well, they're not there for that reason. They're there to make money, and they'll make money out of the vendor, and they'll make money out of the buyer.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that there were some reports over the weekend that New South Wales is, quote, clamping down on underquoting. So we'll see whether that has any teeth or not, or whether it's just the same old, same old. But for me, this is a really, really critical issue. We've touched on it many times before, that people really don't understand how the markets work and how agents can steer the conversation and influence vendors and also prospective purchasers to achieve a purchase. But, this is a really big issue, as we've touched on before. As we come to the end of the show, Edwin, we should just touch on the numbers, I guess, because, the numbers are, still interesting. So in Sydney, 17,219 last week, up to 17,522 this week. And in fact, Dusty's chart shows that the acceleration continues relative to last year. And in fact, just by comparisons, here's the last year figures, 15,963 on the 14th of August. So you can see here that the trajectory is still a little bit higher, although I'd also argue that the quality of listings is also a bit suspect too at the moment.
Yeah, look, what we've got to look from that snapshot of this week last year is look at the houses on market, Martin. The houses on market. Last year we had the same week last year we had 7,020 houses on market, and this week we've got 7,476, about 350 houses more, 356 houses more than 456 houses more than last year. The extra numbers that we've got are from apartments and land. Land this time last year, 952. We basically, we've got 350 or so more parcels of land for sale. So where we've got the appetite in the Sydney market and the highest demand is freestanding homes. There's not much of a difference in terms of listings, and this is why we got to drill down into what type of property, where it is, what it is, and how it's presented. And so that's why I sent that snapshot so we can get the comparison. Although we are tracking over 1,600 more this time than last year. But before we get too excited, when we start talking freestanding homes, there's not a lot out there, for the demand, especially when the WeChat chatterers call by in the areas where you would think that first-time buyers would want to move in. They're really it's a hard slog.
It is, absolutely. And again, the quality of what's on the market is quite suspect too. So I've had a few one-to-one conversations in the last week where people have looked at some of the properties that have come on, and they tend to be B and C class properties. A lot of people in perhaps more desirable properties just holding back and not doing anything at the moment. Let's look at Melbourne briefly, just to give a comparison. So on the 5th, we had 27,241 available in Melbourne, and then 27,243 the following week, so a slight rise. And it's interesting, again, a lot of houses relative to Sydney, and fascinating that the apartments and townhouses, well, they're there, but a lot of the story, of course, is houses. But I have to qualify that again by saying quality of listings is not flash at the moment, particularly in Melbourne. A lot of investment properties and ex-investment properties coming on, and a lot of vendors still quite aggressive in terms of their price expectations, despite the fact the prices in Melbourne are continuing to slide.
Yeah, but who's to say that old mate Dan doesn't start spruiking down there and sets up a real estate office, in competition with Albo and Co.
Could well. Who knows? Talking of Queensland, let's just look there. And on the 5th, 3,641 properties for sale in and around Brisbane, and 3,620 the following week, still quite low. And interestingly, again, some of the analysis that I've done recently suggests that investment yields in Queensland are still relatively positive, but they are dropping slightly. And we're also seeing some of those trends that we saw in Melbourne with regard to clamping down on investment properties beginning to trickle up into that area too, in and around Brisbane, particularly on the Gold Coast. So that'll be interesting. Looking briefly at the auctions story, this activity.
Yeah, there's a bit more of a rise. I guess agents were telling the vendors that there's higher chance of the RBA lifting its rate. So let's go to auction, a quicker sale. Yeah, who knows? I think we are getting in terms of temperature. I feel, I mean, I could be wrong, but it's not as cold as what last year, and we seem to be entering into early spring. In terms of numbers on market and in auctions, numbers climbing. Yeah, it could be a bit of an early start to the spring season. It's just a wait and see. But again, the numbers aren't that flash to really say much about it. A bit of the same old. There's not much there.
And again, just to highlight, of course, that agents tend to make more money through an auction cycle because they can charge more for the marketing. They can have a more compressed campaign, and whether in fact you get a better result is I think marginal at best, but they can make more money on the way through. So that's one of the reasons why they still quite often spruik auctions. Just briefly on the rental side, in Sydney on the 5th we had 12,716. On the 12th, 12,772. And in Melbourne, we had on the 5th, 10,685 and now 10,807. So just a slight rise. And it's interesting that some of the commentators who've been looking at vacancy rates in the rental sector are suggesting that maybe vacancy rates are coming off their lows just slightly. And people are perhaps suggesting that could be to do with the lower number of students that are coming back into the country at the moment. And as we look forward over the next few months with the changed migration rules and things, possibly that will actually ease some of the very low levels of vacancies. But again, I'm not quite so convinced as many. There's still high demand, but the rents are not necessarily easing back and still quite strong. So pretty sour story for the rental sector. And in fact, my latest analysis on rental stress shows that despite the tax cuts and the support for electricity costs, et cetera, the rental stress is still very high relative to what we've seen previously. So it's certainly not necessarily a good news story. And as we come to the end of the show, Edwin, just time for your thought of the week. And well, this is this is a doozy.
Look, it's just talking to different clients, and one in particular that over the weekend is had a bad case of food poisoning. And Dusty was out for a few days. So, and it comes back to just being careful what we eat outside. So, because it's costing us a lot more, not only in food, but also in the fact that if you're a contractor, working for yourself, working as for others, but under a contract basis, well, you don't get paid for the downtime, for that sick leave that you otherwise have, right? If you're on a full-time job. So on that note, Martin, and just telling our viewers and followers to be careful. On that note, I've reached out to one of our avid followers of the show, also a client of ours, Ukrainian Russian, and he's lent me his Geiger counter. So this is his uncle's Geiger counter. I don't know whether you can see there. It's flashing green. So I'm not radioactive. I am not radioactive. I put it next to the phone. The phone is not radioactive. So this is what I'm going to be testing my food with, because especially if things escalate in the Middle East, then we end up with some sort of dirty bombs and shit around the world. I want to make sure that the food import that we're importing, because we're importing a lot of food at the moment, I'm going to put it through this little baby just to make sure. And also, this is also he's lent me this so as I can check out the natural stones, the dark reddish green stones that are coming over from China, because they're believed to be radioactive. So let's wait and see. So thanks, mate, for the loan, and everyone should get one. But the only thing is, you have to subscribe to a website in Russia to get it.
Well, very interesting. Well, it'll be interesting to see whether that stone is more radioactive. Certainly, you should check bananas. I believe that bananas are radioactive.
I'll start checking food more regularly, and I'll put it up on my X feed or Twitter feed button, and we'll see. But I was told that if the red bricks, the old red bricks, right, when the sun comes out, and this is what he tells me, our follower that loaned me this tells me that if you turn this on, let's say around lunchtime on a sunny day, and you turn this baby on and you put it up against the red bricks, it actually flashes red. It actually senses some sort of radioactivity. So I'll have to. I'm testing it. But as I said, for me, it's more for the food imports that were out there, because you don't want to get food poisoning. There's so much going on in the world, Martin. Who knows?
No, good advice, and certainly you're right. If you're a self-employed person and you're out of work for a few days simply because of food poisoning, that's a big economic cost. Well, as we come to the end of the show, Edwin, another very important conversation I think we've had today. I will just remind people, by the way, that tomorrow I'll be running my live stream, and I have Leith Van Onselen coming on, and we're going to talk about property sandcastles and other myths. So join us at 8 p.m. Sydney time for a deep dive into some of those economic data points. And of course, Leith has a very powerful position in terms of understanding why housing is where it is and what needs to be done. So join us for that. Edwin, I want to say thank you very much for the conversation today. And well, we'll do it all again next week. And I reckon it'll be even crazier.
Hope so and hope not. Hope so for more stories to tell, and hope not for the sake of those that are looking to be just to find a housing Martin. It's painful out there. But all the best to the folks, and good luck, Martin, in your with all your endeavours there in England, and stay out of trouble.
Thanks, Edwin. Take care. We'll see you next week. See ya.